Welcome to My Week After the Show, where we're going to talk just briefly about Rachel Dolezal, the former head of the NAACP in Seattle. This story has multiplied and taken so many strange twists and turns. It's kind of hard to follow, but I want to get your take on this. I'm going to start with you, Nolan.
Well, I mean, we're in sort of a new, uncertain era when it comes to identity. There's a growing notion that you are who you think you are, rather than, you know, what biology might suggest you are. And, you know, you've heard a lot of comparisons over the last week. Is this any different than Bruce Jenner saying, I'm a woman? You know, she's saying, I'm black. And, you know, who are you to say whether she is or not?
Who are we to say? Are we to say?
Well, I mean, I think certainly race is a social construct to begin with, right? I mean, it's a definition that we've come up with to divide people into categories, and this is somebody really pushing back against that and saying, well, if I live this way, if I have these experiences, what separates me from anybody else? Now, of course, the fact that it's a choice separates her from everybody else. She could decide at any point, well, I don't want to be that anymore, and be part of the majority population, which she was apparently when she went to Howard University. She found it to her advantage to be a white person at a majority black institution. But I think this challenges all of our ideas about who we are and how we define things like race, especially in this country. I mean, this is a country that was founded on the idea that we are different and that those differences matter much more than we would say they do today. This is somebody who's saying, hold on a second.
So you see her sort of heroic?
No, I don't know that it's heroic. I think that, I mean, there's some real, first of all, I think there's some real mental illness lurking behind
well, now, is that
some of
fair
this.
to say? I guess I'm trying to get my mind around how's it different than what Bruce Jenner did.
I mean, I think
is it a different? And I'm asking
it's
that.
probably.
I don't know.
I mean, it's probably the same kind of motivation, right? I don't feel like I am the way I was born,
body, right?
But from a cultural perspective, this person also did an awful lot of good. As a black person, she, you know, decided that
Bruce
this was
Jenner
going to
won
be
the decathlon
her,
as a male.
as
I mean, but if the question is, so then what? You know, where does this stop? If gender and race are liquid, why not age and appearance? I mean, I could show up here next week as a foxy young black woman.
That would be more of a stretch than either Bruce Jenner or Rachel Dolezal.
I mean, are you kidding me right now with that?
Who are you to say I'm not?
Well, and I think that's a question worth confronting, because again, these are all artificial. These are all race as opposed to gender. I mean, and they are different, right? Let's be clear. There's a lot more biology involved in race than there is in the cultural context of.
But certainly not in gender.
In gender, I'm sorry, in gender. There's more biology involved in gender than there is in the cultural construct of race.
Hang on, Nolan. Hang on, foxy lady. I think young foxy lady. I think what was disappointing for people too. You can understand if she identified with the black culture, but that she continually lied about things, and that's the rub. Because again, she had done so many things, but the lying about it or the hiding.
But some of it is about.
If that's your choice, you have to. I mean,
but also think about how many life situations people find themselves in that are like that, where you tell a lie in an instant. And then it sort of grows.
Brian Williams, anyway.
Then it becomes the truth, and it becomes increasingally difficult to go back and say, well, this initial thing I did or said was not true, and so everything I've built around it is therefore.
But when you're in the public eye like that, though, and you have built a career or and a cause that way, I don't know. I guess that you can't do that, or you have to stop.
Is it a lie? Because I mean, if you apply the same sort of test, same sort of standard to this new idea of transracial, as you do to transgender, I mean, they're walking around with male parts and checking boxes that say they're female, and we're saying as a society, now that's okay because that's how you identify. How do you apply a different standard here?
Right. I mean, you also have the weight of history here. I mean, there's an awful history associated with the way African Americans have been treated in this society. And so there's a special sensitivity to people who try to appropriate that, right? And say, well, that's mine too. Well, it's not, because you didn't experience it. At the same time, you know, there's nothing wrong with her saying, I feel strongly about, you know, this injustice and I want to fight for it. She just should have done it as who she was, as opposed
what
to...
does it say about the status of white people? I mean, a generation ago, you had black people trying to pass as white because that was the easier life. James Weldon Johnson, you know, autobiography of an ex-colored man.
Sure.
And, you know, that was a real phenomenon. Now you got white people trying to pass as black. What's that say about what's becoming?
I think what's just interesting too is it's an interesting circumstance with her family as well. If you take a look at some of the details that are coming about her upbringing, the fact that she's in some kind of standoff with her parents and the children that they adopted, and there's some kind of custody problem, and now there's something about her brother that has come out. That there's a lot of things that are extra things that are swirling around than just one woman who felt that she identified as black.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here, and I think everyone should be a little hesitant to judge too harshly, given that we may not be talking about somebody who's playing with a full deck all of the time.
But isn't, I mean, when you talk about people who are conflicted and confused, I mean, isn't that always the case?
Well, sure, right, right.
But I think you can ask the question then, is she conflicted and confused? She doesn't seem to be conflicted or confused.
And that's really the central question.
Confused about her
Is this somebody who was genuinely struggling with her racial identity and saying, you know, boy, I really identify much more strongly with this race than this other, that I don't have any genetic connection to or any ethnic connection to, and than this other? Or was this somebody who saw an advantage, you know, a cultural advantage in being one thing or another and took advantage? And one act is cynical, the other is a little more excusable and maybe endearing. But either way, I mean, this is a person who's got a lot of problems.
Well, but I mean, there's a familiar ring to her story when she says, "Since I was 6 years old, I felt like I was black."
Right.
Well, since I was 6 years old, I felt like I was a girl or a woman.
Different gender.
There's, I'm telling
you, it could be totally genuine, right?
It could be.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, guys. Thanks. That's my week after the show.